We're now live. Okay, we are now live. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is Senate Finance, Wednesday, April 14th. And we are going to start with taking a look at H 437. And Representative Kornheiser was the reporter from the House Committee on Ways and Means is here. So I thought I would give her a chance to tell us what it is and why you are recommending this bill to us.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you all today. For the record, Representative Emily Kornheiser from Brattleboro. Happy to share with you about H 437. So this bill does three things. First one is it expands the existing affordable housing tax credit by $250,000 per year for 5 years to be dedicated to the financing and replacement of manufactured homes. The second is that it expands the sales and use tax exemption on manufacturers' equipment to items that are part of an integrated process. And the third is that it creates a new surcharge on the transfer of high-value properties to be paid by the buyer at the time of the sale. And I'll tell you a little bit about our thinking about each of those things, and then I think you have some more witnesses that can dive deeper into the details with you. So regarding the surcharge on the transfer of high value properties, I think we are all aware that we're operating in a constantly changing landscape and that this has never been more true than in the last year and a half almost now. And at least in House Ways and Means, but I imagine over here, we've been talking a lot about the K-shaped recovery and how this pandemic has impacted some of us in different ways than others, and that the other side of it is going to look very differently for different members of us. And so we really want to make sure that our fiscal policies are taking that changing landscape into account. And this new surcharge is one such measure. So specifically, the surcharge is on a portion of the values of properties in excess of $1 million and includes all transferred properties. That's residential and non-residential homes, second homes, condos, and commercial properties. It is paid by the buyer, the same way our existing transfer surcharge is, and it's marginal in that it applies only to the value over $1 million, and it's set at the rate of 0.5%. The revenue is projected to raise about $2 million per year for the general fund, and Graham is here, and I'm sure he can talk to you more about all the numbers. The second piece of the bill is the manufacturing sales and use tax exemption. And what that is in plain language is that our existing sales and use tax exemption for manufacturers is specific to items that are part of the production line and essentially like physically connected to each other on the production line. And the tax department shared with us that given some changes in manufacturing, they are fairly regularly encountering confusion with folks who thought that part of their manufacturing process was exempt and so are needing to pay back sales and use tax. And so in order to clarify the issue, and really help support manufacturing in Vermont, we expanded the sales and use tax exemption to anything that's part of the process. And so I'm going to give you one little example of this because, well, it didn't make any sense to me until I had an example. So I'm going to share that example with you. So in existing statute, the sales and use tax exemption would not apply to an item that was put on to stir, say, a pot of meat products, if that like massive stir was able to be moved from pot to pot because it wasn't connected to the manufacturing line. Another example is that a fan that might be used to move wood chips off a line in order to keep the product clean. If that fan was able to be moved from location to location and sometimes was used for cooling the humans and sometimes was used for moving the wood chips, that also would not be included in the existing exemption. And so by expanding it to things that are part of the process rather than part of the physical plant, we were able to clarify the exemption there. If you want many more details on that, I'd say the tax department is where you should go for that
We
conversation.
will hear
did
from
have-
them, but we did work on this several years ago with the packaging process. You could manufacture something, but then it went next door to be packed, and that was causing the same kinds of issues. If it was connected by a conveyor belt, it was one thing. If it wasn't, it was another thing. So not a new issue. Sounds like a new set of problems that have turned up with it.
Exactly. And the packaging also came up as sort of the sub packaging was exempt, but the larger packaging wasn't. And
Shrink wrapped it, it was one thing, but if you put it in the box, yeah.
yeah, we
Okay.
spent a lot of time talking about meat sticks, and I hope you also have that opportunity over here.
Meat sticks. Okay,
It's going in the same direction, Madam Chair.
yes.
Every time we clarify it, there's a request for even further reduction in taxation on those items. That's same direction, time after time.
Yes, it is. Maybe we should all take a course in clarity, which I know is not what you meant. So,
I will, before I jump into the final section with the manufacturing house tax credit, I will say that we did ask sort of when we move out of this gray area, what exactly is the next gray area that will be opened up? And that was a conversation we had in committee and felt like we had bound this fairly well.
okay, good.
So
So hopefully this will settle it.
I mean, probably not, but we are going to do
No,
our
it's
best.
like
aren't
it's
we?
starting to turn into little cigars,
Mhm.
which is another one that pops up regularly. Okay.
So the final piece of the bill is the manufactured housing tax credit. And as we are all acutely aware, we have a significant shortage of housing opportunities in our community. Manufactured homes are a fantastic affordable option for many folks, but older trailers suffer from significant challenges with heating and cooling and air quality, as well as resale value. And this section of the bill builds on a successful and quite oversubscribed program that helps Vermonters through down payment assistance and zero interest loans to purchase replacement homes. And you have many lovely people to tell you much more about this program. What I will say is that in my community, we have a significant manufactured home park that has community members who are still recovering from Irene. And so as we are entering recovery from a pandemic, we are still have communities that are feeling the effects of a previous significant challenge in our communities. And I would like, at least on the other side of this massive community disruption, to be doing something to continue to heal the disruptions from that last one. And I really see this manufacturing home tax credit as an opportunity to continue to both make amends from that, to continue adding affordable housing to our communities, and as a really significant opportunity for some good work on climate change and housing health. And that, I think, is the sum of what I have to share with you all today.
Okay. Senator Hardy.
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Thank you, Representative Kornheiser. Are the two provisions, the manufactured home provision and the STIR provision, I'm going to always think of it as that.
Manufacturing process.
The manufacturing process provision, are those the same or as what was in the governor's proposed budget, or are they different versions of the same concept?
Ooh, the manufacturing exemptions is from, yes, they are both.
That's what I thought. We got testimony on this earlier this session, I believe. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think we did an initial walkthrough of this bill when it first came over. Senator Bray.
Hi, Representative Kornheiser. I'm not looking at the bill on my little screen at the moment, so I'm going to ask a question, and that is on the surcharge on values in excess of $1 million. Does that distinguish or exempt or treat differently farms?
It's all properties, but there's also a full sort of complicated category around farms that I that I think provide other opportunities for tax relief and sale relief, but no, it does not hold any property transfers separate.
Okay.
But it is a marginal rate. It's just for the value over $1 million that we're levying it.
Right. Well, and it's one of those things where, so in Addison County, we have many large farms, and although $1 million for normal folks sounds like a lot of money, by the time you have 4,000 acre farm, you can be, there's a farm for sale that's $20 million over this way. So anyway, thanks very much.
Mhm.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Sirotkin.
I just wanted to ask Representative Kornheiser, you mentioned something about, I think, a $2 million up to the general fund. And by statute, the money is theoretically split to the general fund and the Housing and Conservation Board and Regional Planning. Is there language in this bill that directs this additional $2 million specifically to the general fund?
There's language in the bill that holds all of those other provisions harmless and puts this specific revenue from the specific surcharge directly into the general fund.
Thank you.
Questions for Representative Kornheiser? Okay, if not, then we're gonna, I lost my witness list. Small screens go away if you don't keep them going. Okay, Mara Collins. So Mara, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm Maura Collins. I'm with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. It's my first time in front of your committee this year, but I think I've testified on these manufactured home tax credits before you all several times. I will not be speaking to the stirrer piece of this legislation, but I do want to say it's exciting to see so much aligned support for the increase in manufactured housing credits that VHFA administers. We were really pleased to see this included in the governor's budget and fully support this increase. And I hope you can pass this bill to serve more homeowners who need it. I'm going to talk a bit about the boring technical aspects of the credit to answer your questions before you have them, and explain to you why this is such a smart investment on behalf of the state. And then Chris Donnelly will cover what the program does and who's served by it. And I think Brian's then going to speak about the large coalition of people behind this effort. These credits naturally confuse people, and for very good reason. They are a bit complicated. So while I know I've testified in years past, I just want to make sure we're all starting from the same starting point. And I know we have some newer committee members. So I want to explain that currently, before you pass this bill, there are already $425,000 in homeownership credits available, but not all of them go to the manufactured housing replacement program run by the Champlain Housing Trust that we'll be talking about today. Back in 2011, the legislature created these credits, these homeownership credits, and they're designed to be sold to support new homeownership construction and or the purchase and rehabilitation of homes, so that we can have affordable homeownership opportunities. And the legislature back then had $100,000 dedicated to this in the sale of these credits. Then in 2013, in response to Tropical Storm Irene, $200,000 was added. So now we're up to $300,000. And a new use of these credits was added, which covered manufactured housing replacements. This is now an eligible use in recognition of the need in the state to buy up old manufactured homes that were energy inefficient and replace them with newer, modern, more efficient homes. So that's when this program was born, and it's run successfully ever since. In 2019, the pool of these homeownership credits was expanded again, and it brought it up to the current $425,000 level. And so these credits can be used for a mix of new homeownership construction. Think about building starter homes for first-time home buyers. Can be used to acquire and majorly rehabilitate homes that need huge renovation and sell them to income-eligible first-time buyers. And it can be used for this manufactured home replacement program. So the reason I say that this is all confusing is because the numbers I just gave you are actually not the dollars that are fully available, because it's a 5-year tax credit. So an investor can purchase the 5-year tax credit as a way to lower their tax liabilities. In our experience, we've sold these mostly to banks, but it could be an insurance company or a captive insurance who could purchase these credits. And they buy these credits to lower the taxes that they would have paid on the deposits that they hold. So that's a really stable tax source, because deposits don't fluctuate a whole lot. And they can plan in advance, these investors, how much they'll need in credits in future years. So in a typical year, if VHFA had $425,000 of credits, homeownership credits, and that means that in the first year, if one investor bought all of them, which never happens, but let's pretend one investor buys all of them in year one, they could reduce the taxes they owe to the state by $425,000. But it's a 5-year credit. So if one investor purchased that many credits, it means they'd actually be reducing their taxes by $425,000 for each of the next 5 years. So what they pay for the credits, what they pay VHFA is $425,000 times 5, because they get 5 years of this benefit, times roughly, it's been hovering around 95 cents. They don't pay dollar for dollar for 2 reasons. The investor needs some kind of incentive to purchase these credits instead of paying the taxes directly. If there was no benefit, then they would just pay their tax bill. And the value of money decreases over time. So an investor who pays the money upfront today won't be able to take that tax credit for 3, 4, 5 years, and they could have invested in something else. And so they're giving up those earnings. So 95 cents is a great return on tax credits. Nationally, in other state programs, we see far lower returns that we get. And historically in Vermont, we actually used to get closer to 90 cents, and the market does fluctuate. For example, this year, there were some unique reasons that get a little complicated, but we only got 93 cents this year for them. But otherwise, going back to 2015, when VHFA started selling these credits, we've always gotten 95 cents on them. So there was really strong interest this year and for the past several years in these credits. So with deposits up, meaning a lot of us got stimulus checks, most of us haven't been traveling, we've been spending less, going out less. So banks and others are anticipating higher taxes on these deposits because deposits are higher than almost ever before. So we expect that if and when you increase these credits, we will have no problem selling these credits to investors. In fact, we haven't even fully pursued the insurance market or the captive insurance market as potential buyers, because we've had enough demand from the banks we go to year after year as routine customers. And I know of at least one investor who was going to reach out to you all directly to show you their support for this program. The last thing I want to say before handing it over to Chris is I'm very open to explaining how this 5-year tax credit hits the state's budget. Usually you call up Graham, and you're welcome to hear it from him instead. We use the same chart to explain this to people. But I do have a file I could share if you all wanted me to walk through that very quickly, or we can move on if there aren't questions about how this hits the
No,
budget.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Senator McDonald, do you have a question?
Yeah, this has been interesting. How is the tax credit that was just described to us now different from the tax credit that was available to rehabilitate historic buildings in downtowns as far as its working methods.
Yep.
How is this one different other than it applies to different dwellings?
Yep. That program is a 1-year tax credit. So any investor who buys that tax credit, they get to use it once and then that's it. This one is a 5-year tax credit. That would be the predominant difference between the two.
So we are on the previous one, we take money from the general fund revenues, and it's available to operate programs in the state of Vermont to rehabilitate buildings that no one is interested in going up and fixing and repairing because it's too darn expensive. And this one is to just simply make manufactured homes less expensive to buyers.
Actually, when Chris gets up next, I'm the boring one. I'm the one who's here with the technical aspects, and I'm really
Oh, you're not boring. You are telling us the things that we need to know.
true.
Is this tax credit, which takes money out of the general fund for a period of time that you've described, to make these manufactured homes less costly?
Yes. And it replaces, in many cases, inefficient manufactured homes, thereby helping to reach some of our climate goals by taking inefficient homes and not only making them more affordable upfront for someone, but also over the length of them living in that home, as well as reducing greenhouse gases from less emissions.
And in making these, in doing this, does this require an extra level of efficiency in the manufacture of these homes in exchange for the subsidies?
Yes, they do have to be Energy Star certified.
Does it raise above the current level of energy efficiency? Does it raise it to a higher level of efficiency?
I'd rather let Chris answer that question, but I know he heard it and I'm sure he's prepared to speak to it. I don't administer the program. I should make perfectly clear that VHFA's job is to receive the authority of selling credits, work with the investors to sell the credits, and then turn that money in bulk over to the Champlain Housing Trust. And they set up the program rules for the statewide program throughout Vermont that sets what those kind of standards would be.
So someone else will answer that. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Bray and then Senator Pearson.
Hello again, Ms. Collins.
So one day.
I have a quick question. The 425,000 is that credit fully subscribed? No problem selling it out, the offering?
Correct. We have not had any. In fact, again, in 2019, you all increased it and we did not have any lowering of the pricing or problems selling it even after you increased it a few years ago.
Okay. In terms of, I don't know if this is a question for you or maybe for Mr. Donnelly, I'm just wondering 425, I mean, it's great that we're doing this. It doesn't seem like a lot of money so I'm wondering how many manufactured homes that can be leveraged into buying down the price, like what the impact is in terms of making them more affordable or accessible.
Yep, I know that Chris will be speaking to that in just a minute, and I will agree with you that it is a very modest investment overall. We do not, in this whole country, have a lot of ways of making homeownership affordable. We've chosen to build affordable rental housing, but make homeownership affordable through complex financing mechanisms and mortgage interest deduction and things like that. So this is a unique program that Vermont should be very proud of, that we actually have done something to help spur the creation of homeownership units.
Great, thank you.
Maura, thank you. I think I'm understanding, and we're not changing anything other than increasing the amounts in this proposal, right?
Correct.
But it sounds like basically if you think of it as a grant that the state's giving out, we take a 5% hit because you've got to resell it. Do you have a sense of, from the state's point of view, why don't we just make it a grant? Like, why don't we just appropriate it as opposed to making it a tax credit? Is that a cash flow strategy, or I'd be curious your thinking?
This program has a rental housing component I'm not speaking about today, as well as a down payment assistance component through VHFA's programs. So in total, the state's housing credit program is larger than this 425,000. And the legislatures make choices all the time about whether they want to take that upfront hit through a direct appropriation or spread the cost over time through a tax credit. And in this case, these investments have been modeled after a very successful federal tax credit program. And you all created this as a tax credit. Could it be an appropriation? It could. It will startle some people as to see that 1-year impact on the cost, but that is a possibility. I do want to say that Vermont's state tax credit is modeled so well that I continually am asked by other states that are developing state credits for the first time. We are the gold standard, and everyone's goal is to start talking to their legislature with Vermont as the standard that they want to get to, and then along the way they get compromised down. But ours is very clean, efficient. Investors like it. It has good value. Some other state credits, as I said, sell for 70 cents maybe. So it really is a well-designed program that I have no other tweaks to make to the program except to increase it for the reasons we're talking about.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Mara? Okay. Mara, did you have a real quick slide to show us?
I do. And here it is. I hope this is on your website, and I hope that we can go through it quickly, where I show you that the first row is the existing credits that I spoke about. It's 425,000. And I'm projecting forward here from this coming fiscal year for the next several years. There is on the table today with this bill the additional 250, so the total would be 675,000. So what that means, though, is that as I explained, these are 5-year credits. And so based on the decisions of legislators before you, based on the existing homeownership credits, the cost in the future for these credits is $2,125,000. Why this number is growing in green over the last few years is that, again, in 2019, you all decided to increase these credits. And every year, the impact of these credits has to grow on itself. So this next row kind of illustrates it better. If you were to pass this bill and increase the credits by 250,000, it means that this coming fiscal year, the state would forego an extra $250,000 in taxes. Next year, that's going to grow to $500,000 because we'd sell a new $250,000 in credits, but we also still have to realize that there's investors who bought them in 2022 who are on their second year of claiming a 5-year credit. And so that continues to grow up to a point, and then it levels off. So you can see in this peachy colored row that in year 1, it's going to cost the state $250,000, but in year 2, it's going to cost $500,000, and that'll grow up to a $1.25 million total cost to the state, and it accumulates over time. And so what you see in that green row is the years 3, 4, and 5 of the decision you made a couple years ago to add to these 5-year tax credits. The bottom piece here is just talking about the total impact of all these credits is 2.125 million, and that will grow up to a cumulative impact on the state budget of 3.375 million, and it will not be larger than that.
Okay, but if we do these tax increases, it will, the credit, if we increase it, we will be at almost, or maybe a little more than $5 million.
Nope.
Once it comes through. My question is, I buy a $250,000 credit, is that is 250,000 a year for 5 years?
Yes,
I assume that I pay 5 times the 250. Is that,
yes.
or do I pay 250 and I get 250 for 4 years?
Nope, the first one. You take the 250,000 and you multiply it by 5, and that's
Five.
what you pay, and that's
Okay.
what generates the money. And I want to be clear that the total cost to the state, if you make this change, is not $5 million, but $3,375,000.
Oh,
And that is only a
okay, total. All right.
$1.5 million increase.
Okay. Read the fine print. All right. So it's 3.375 million.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, committee? Senator Saratkin, then Senator Bray.
So just to be clear, Maura, the statute requires that these be 5-year credits?
They are set up, yes, to be 5-year credits.
It says that in the statute?
Yep.
Okay.
Senator Bray?
So I think I asked a question that was not quite on the mark earlier, and that I was thinking about 425 is not that much, but you are actually selling 425 times 5. It's all paid up front. So you get quite a bit more money to work with on year 1 of the 5 years. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And this increase is dedicated to manufactured homes, not to other aspects of the program.
That's exactly right. This $250,000 increase is just for the manufactured home replacement program, which we haven't even talked about all the wonderful benefits that that does for Vermonters and communities. So I'm fine with turning it over to Chris. I'm done unless others have questions for me.
Okay, if we have no more, Senator McDonald has a question.
These homes are being sold on the open market to anybody that shows up on the lot and buys one, right?
That's a perfect question, segue for Chris. I'm sorry, Senator, I'm not trying to avoid your questions. It's just he really understands this program.
No,
This
oh,
Age of Investors.
we'll hear it from Chris.
Okay,
Thank you.
floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Chris Donnelly with the Champlain Housing Trust, and appreciate being in. And I appreciate not doing the math that Maura just went through. Doing math in public is not my forte. I do have a short slide presentation if you'd like me to share, or it's on your committee website. I can just talk you through it.
I'll probably share it is helpful.
Okay. Great. So this, as Maura said, this is a program that started right after Tropical Storm Irene. The number of people that live in manufactured homes or mobile homes in the state it's about 8% of the housing stock. Yet 14 or 15% of the people that lost or had damaged homes after that storm lived in mobile homes. So they were disproportionately impacted by that. In fact, the first person that we helped replace their home worked at the Wayside Diner, and we met her down and did a closing. She was a wait staff there, and we did a closing on her break back in 2013. This is the way the program works. People that want to replace their home or want to place a home in a park or on their own land come to us or come to one of our partner agencies around the state in different regions. They apply for it. They have to go through homebuyer education class so that they know what they're getting into. We serve people up to, I believe, 100% of median income. And buyers need to be able to put down a little bit of money on their own, $2,500. But then we provide that kind of silent second mortgage to help lower the monthly costs, lower the mortgage costs. And they go to a bank or a credit union to mortgage the rest. The loans that we make are tiered. There's a loan for Energy Star model homes. which is 27.5 and 35,000 for zero energy modular homes. And getting to Senator McDonald's question, these are homes that are being replaced that are old, leaky, 1980s, 1970s homes that are being replaced with new ones that are energy efficient. We do this program, as I mentioned, statewide. We have agencies that we collaborate with. Sometimes they're called the homeownership centers that serve different regions of the state. Those people provide a lot of the intake. We do a lot of the back office and the financing and support the buyers that way. Since that first one, we have helped over 200 people purchase one of these homes. The average household income is $44,000. And people are finding a really affordable way to become homeowners through this. A lot of the people, a quarter of them, are elderly or disabled. The program has expanded a little bit since the first days of just replacing homes that were damaged or ruined by Irene. And that was just to help people replace or purchase homes that were inefficient or unhealthy. In fact, there was a woman this last March that we helped purchase a new one in Randolph that had lost her home in a fire, and she was living in her camper for a few months. She was going to end up in a motel, and she probably would have still been in a motel through the pandemic if we hadn't stepped in and helped her purchase a home. She earned about $11,000 a year. She was on disability. So we really are able to make these homes very affordable for very low income people. Right now, the credit that out of the $425,000 that VHFA has, they make $200,000 available for this program. That allows us to provide housing for about 30 people each year, 30 new homes each year. We get about 100 applications. And again, we work with all the different banks, not all the different banks, but many different banks and credit unions throughout the state. Here's just a quick map of the geographic distribution. We've been talking to our friends in the southern part of the state below Route 4 about why the uptake is so low. We hope to solve some of that. But as you see, there is general distribution around the state, except for the lower half is a little bit lighter. But we're in every county in the state. Here's a typical example, and this is kind of drastic, but it's not uncommon to see homes like this in some of the parks around. And so this is a home that we replaced in Hancock with this one on the right. And then lastly, this is a woman up in Swanton, up in Senator Brock's neck of the woods. She's a single mom, works in an insurance company, had been living with her mother in another manufactured home or mobile home at a park. And she was able to get into her own home and raise her kid there. And she really raved about the energy efficiency of these homes and how her bills were so much lower. But also she just couldn't afford an apartment on her salary. So this was one way for her to actually own her own home at a lower cost than she could have rented. So I'm gonna stop there, but that's a really quick. Hope I didn't talk too fast.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly and Ms. Collins. I have a couple questions about the homes. You said you provide a silent second mortgage, I think is what you called it. So the buyer has to have a first mortgage, which is a regular mortgage through a bank, and then you provide a smaller second mortgage that is really low interest. Is that?
Sorry, I should have explained that more. It's zero interest.
Zero interest, okay.
And it's deferred until time of sale, and it can actually be assumed by the next buyer.
Oh, I see, okay.
The program. So we leave the money in to keep the home affordable. If the new buyer does not want to assume it, then they pay it back and we recycle that money for another home.
Okay, so it's deferred. So assuming the person spends 20 years in the home, they wouldn't have to pay it over that 20 years.
No.
Then they sell the home and the new buyer could have it or not, or pay it
Yeah.
back. Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
And then my second question is about the, the energy efficiency and that type of thing. And you showed a couple examples. There are a lot of, maybe not a lot, I don't know. I know of a few in my district or that mobile home parks that are in really bad shape, not just the individual units, but the park itself. They have drainage issues, sewer issues, all sorts of problems, unfortunately. And I'm wondering, do you have requirements in the program that about not just the unit itself, but the siting and the location and the place where you put it?
Yes, and you're touching on a much bigger issue in our housing infrastructure with the mobile home parks around the state. That's a really looming challenge for all of us, I think. We lean on the banks and the mortgage, the credit unions. They won't give a home a mortgage if it's not gonna have a good septic or water system. So all those things have to be in place. If they're not in place, then the bank won't do the mortgage.
Okay, so there's not theoretically, or hopefully in actual practice, there's not thank you. My daughter's delivering me a cup of tea. There's not a possibility or a risk that these nice new energy efficient homes are going to be put in a place where they're going to be damaged, or the homeowner is going to be living in a place that doesn't have good septic. Then there's enough, you feel secure in that.
Yes, and we personally do inspections. The people can do a little, can do some site work too. If they can mortgage that, they can do some site work and grading to make sure, or fix the pad that it's sitting on. But it's out of the floodplain. It's out of the flood zone. It needs to be, in a good setup that way.
Okay, because obviously this is part of the investment is, the long-term investment. And one final question is, it sounds like a lot of the sort of PR on the program is done through banks, because banks would know of your program and then suggest them to buyers. Is that true, or do you have other ways for buyers to know about this program?
Some of the manufacturers of the homes themselves do some of the marketing, but mostly it's word of mouth. And really, it's not the type of program we need to advertise.
Except for in the southern part of the state, apparently.
Well, yes, and so we need to be more intentional about that. And that's really through our partners, really reaching out to people.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this point? Senator McDonald.
I had two questions that Chris was going to answer. One was, is there are heightened requirements for the quality of weatherization in the homes that are purchased?
So yes, they're Energy Star, and that means that they all are going to have R33 in the walls, or R19 in the walls, R33 in the ceilings. I may not have that quite straight, but I can get you that. But they're built to certain standards. So that's the minimum, is an Energy Star rated home.
So my question was, we have minimum standards from Energy Star, and that's what, to sell a home, you're obliged to, a manufactured home, you're obliged to meet that standard under today's law. Is that correct?
Correct. Under this
Does this bill require a higher level of weatherization?
It does not, but it provides an option for people to do a zero energy modular home, which will have a higher standard of energy efficiency and weatherization.
Okay,
So,
Mr.
given
Donnelly,
those-
I think, just clarifying, Senator, are you saying that all manufactured homes sold now have to be Energy Star? Or
I
are there
don't-
less than Energy Star?
I'm asking whether on this program, what level of energy efficiency must be purchased?
Okay, I thought you were saying, was it you said a higher level, and if there's one standard, Energy Star is usually, one step up from the norm, at least when you
Right.
buy appliances.
And we-
you
In
buy-
exchange for this program, is it 2 steps up from the norm?
Yes,
It's at least an Energy Star, or
That's 1 step.
that's, well,
So I gather.
or an option to go 2 steps.
I gather it's no change. So, and my other question was, when you engage in this, we're obliging the state appropriations committee or the loss of revenues for 5 years?
I'm not sure I understood your question.
You have asked us on the finance committee that raises money to raise less money for the state of Vermont to go to the general fund.
Mhm.
So the general fund is going to be short of money, shorter than if we don't do this. Is that correct?
It is correct, but also in the bill is what Representative Kornheiser went through, and that was the surcharge on the property transfer tax for homes over $1 million that would offset this increase. It's not tied together in statute, but this bill, as it's drafted now, has revenue coming in that's supposed to offset this revenue loss.
Okay, thank you, because in the presentation I had failed to make that linkage. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Donnelly, do you know who's supplying these? I know that we have some manufacturers in Vermont, and I'm guessing the program has no restrictions on where you buy your energy efficient home. But I'm wondering if we do get sort of a multiplier effect, because some significant percentage of the purchases are actually made from Vermont manufacturers. I don't know if you have any data on that.
I don't have a breakdown of the manufacturers of the homes that we've placed already. I do know that Vermont's, are you familiar with those, were one popular model in the program. There's a dealer, I believe, I forget exactly where he is, Village Homes, that also provides some of the homes for this. So
I think that might be Montpelier, but.
it might be, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's actually one other thing I just wanted to mention is that the purchasers of these homes also pay sales tax on their homes. And I know this committee sees the different flavors of taxes and fees that people pay as different purposes, but they not only usually almost always pay the property transfer tax on their homes, but they also pay 6% sales tax on their homes. So the percentage of tax that they're paying out of their pocket is so much higher than people that are buying single family homes. They're paying 6 to 7% of the purchase price in taxes to the state. So I think it's not too wild of an idea to think about a surcharge to help pay and help make these folks able to find a good, cheap, decent, affordable home.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm sure that Mr. Donnelly is probably correct on his statement, but I do recall when this committee, Finance Committee, looked at the manufacture of mobile homes and the amount of the mobile homes were paying. People who bought mobile homes paid the sales tax on the mobile home. The manufactured home community came in and said, hey, wait a minute. When you have a home built on your property, you don't pay sales tax on the labor. But when you buy a mobile home, you do. And we reduced, I think it was around 40% of the cost of a manufactured home. We took the sales tax off because we don't tax labor. So I don't know if that 6% is on the entire home or on a portion of the home. And
I will double, I'll look
Please.
at it.
we'll
Yeah,
get
well,
that
I don't want to
double
be,
checked.
Graham just popped up. Graham, can you help us?
Yeah, I'm Graham Campbell from the Joint Fiscal Office. Yes, Senator McDonald is correct. So sales of mobile and manufacturing homes are a portion of the home is exempt from sales tax. About 40% of the home is exempt from sales tax, and remaining 50% is subject to sales tax.
thank you. I'm happy to, I stand corrected. I apologize for misstating that.
Do you pay sales tax on the bulk of the purchase?
On 60% now,
Yes,
when we used to pay it on 100%. Yep.
yes.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Senator Bray.
Well, and just to finish the story that Senator McDonald started, I think, do we not, if you're building a stick-built house, don't you pay sales tax on all the materials that when you're buying, so the other, every 2x4 shows up with a little tax on it. So it's less different than it sounds at first.
So it was an attempt to make manufactured homes be treated the same as the homes that Senator Bray just mentioned. And that's what, this committee gave up that revenue for the reasons that we've stated. Yep.
So I have no more.
To Brian, Senator Pearson, I miss you.
Yeah, no, I just thought of a question for Chris, I think. You are one of the challenges with mobile homes, while affordable, is that they tend to depreciate. Are the new, so the investments, it sort of takes care of our short-term need, but not the financial security that non-mobile homes often offer. Is that still true with the more efficient, sort of more robust Vermods, for instance?
Well, the Vermonts have been around for less than 10 years. So we don't know, we don't have great data on that, but they don't depreciate the same way that the old mobile homes would have. They hold some value, maybe not the same as a stick built, but they do hold or increase a little bit in value.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to move on to Brian Pine. Can't hear me?
Thank you.
On to Brian Pine.
Senator Cummings, thank you. For a while I couldn't hear you. Now I can, but
I tend to keep moving backwards.
that's okay. Thank you. So I am Brian Pine from the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. I think most of you knew Erhard Manka, who did this for many years, and I am serving in an interim role for at least this session. So I will speak briefly about this bill, H437, which our coalition strongly supports and hopes your committee will pass it and it will enjoy support in the full Senate when it reaches the floor. I just want to paint just a little bit of a picture that I think is important in terms of our state. And when I first got involved in this work, believe it or not, it was the mid 80s. And in that time, there was a gathering, it was called the 6th Grafton Conference that the Wyndham Foundation put together. It had about 36 Vermont leaders from across the public, private, nonprofit sectors. And their focus was Vermont's housing future. They really were grappling with the idea that housing was becoming increasingly unavailable and unaffordable for just everyday Vermonters. And among their key findings of that group 35 years ago was this statement, which I think is really appropriate for today. Whether one views housing as a commodity to be bought and sold on the open market, or one of the basic necessities of life to which all citizens are entitled, it must be recognized for the large majority of Vermonters who earn less than $25,000 a year, the traditional market system is not meeting the need for affordable housing. So even if you take that figure from 35 years ago and double it and say for those Vermonters earning $50,000 a year, the housing wage gap is even more pronounced today than it was at that time in our history. And that the pandemic has created the conditions for really rapid, accelerated appreciation of market rate homes and of home values. And in fact, the Digger article in January found that Vermont realtors assisted in the sale of 313 homes worth at least $1 million in 2020, according to one realtor. And in 2019, that number was 112 homes. So it tripled the number of homes sold over $1 million during the pandemic. So things have really shifted. And a lot of those same pressures that in the 1980s led to the creation of the Vermont Housing Conservation Board are really causing rents and home prices to escalate further out of the reach of working Vermonters. And that those who are buying properties, whether they be homes or commercial properties at or above $1 million, can surely more easily absorb the additional tax levied on the transaction. And in practice, the way that fees are handled in transactions of that nature are really subject to negotiation by the parties. And that's the time to do it when you've got a deal on the table and you've got money exchanging. It's often common for the buyer and the seller to discuss sort of a splitting of those fees. So when we talk about fees, I know that Senator Cummings, you have a real estate background. You know more about this than most of us, but it's just important to note that fees are sometimes handled in a creative manner. So we fully support the proposal that will serve more low-income Vermonters by adding a 0.5% surcharge on the sale of properties over $1 million. And we believe that the proceeds from the surcharge are really appropriate funding mechanism to replace the older substandard mobile homes that are found all across our state. The program really has had multiple benefits for the lower income families, reducing their demand for costly energy costs, the publicly funded programs like fuel assistance, weatherization. In addition, the negative health outcomes that are associated with living in substandard housing are largely addressed when folks can get into newer homes. So we talk about mobile and manufactured and modular. I just want to note that when we say mobile homes, it's actually homes that were built prior to 1976, before the HUD code went into effect, that created the manufactured home. So they actually are used interchangeably, but they really are very different things. And almost half of Vermont homes, unfortunately, are pre-76. And there's about 22,000 mobile and manufactured homes in Vermont. And so there's a sizable number of them that are still that pre-76, pre-HUD code homes that are really obsolete, totally obsolete in terms of energy. They're very leaky. They have issues of moisture and mold. So you've heard from Chris Donnelly about the manufactured housing down payment program, enabling over 200 Vermont households with average incomes of $44,000 to replace these homes with new energy efficient homes. The impacts have been significant for the families that have benefited. And surely every senator on this committee, actually every senator in the Senate, has mobile home parks in their districts. And so it's clear that there will be constituents of yours that will be able to access this program and benefit in every county in the state. And I think it's really critical to acknowledge that homes owned by folks living in parks face really unique challenges with financing that make it more difficult. Since they don't own the land, they don't have access to permanent 30-year fixed rate financing in most cases. And so writing down the cost certainly in parks makes a huge impact to make the home that much more affordable for some of the most vulnerable constituents. And on a personal note, for about 5 years, I worked at Efficiency Vermont, VEIC, and was very involved in the Zero Energy Modular program. And we had served over 100 homes by the time when I left at the end of 2019. And this down payment program was the essential missing link that really allowed folks to achieve the dream of getting into a decent home and kind of get out of the trap of being in a substandard home that they couldn't afford to replace. So we're in full support of this proposal and think that it's appropriate that this additional surcharge be the way to fund it. So I hope we'll have support from this committee.
Okay, any questions? Senator McDonald?
So what was the percentage that you hoped that the Ways and Means Committee would have voted out on $1 million homes?
As opposed to the 0.5%?
Yeah, given your testimony. Yeah.
Yeah, we had started at 0.75%, And that seemed like that, I mean, you're asking a great question. Obviously we'd love to see more resources in this program. When we say 200 homes have been assisted, that number should be 2,000 homes, because we've got such a huge need. So in many ways, this program serves as it's a down payment program, but it's also a down payment on the challenge of helping all the working Vermonters who are struggling to get by in these homes. So any amount is going to be much appreciated.
Thank you.
Senator Bray.
Hi, Mr. Pine. Thanks for your work on this issue and a tough market to serve. So we often talk about trying to democratize, an equity mindset for the new energy economy. And it's great that for lower income Vermonters, it seems like a workable way to get to a more efficient home. For the zero energy versions, are you satisfied with their performance? Has it seemed like a good investment?
Well, again, my data is a little bit out of date because I left VEIC at the end of 2019. But what we experienced in the first 5 or 6 years of that model, the zero energy modular, which was being built, in Wilder, still is today. There is another manufacturer in Maine that has become more active in Vermont. So there's more homes actually coming from Maine, a little bit lower price point. And that's a challenge to try and address is, you want more manufacturers rather than less to bring a little more competition to the market. But those homes have held their value when they do transfer, and a few have been reappraised and sold, and they've maintained their value. And the homeowners living in those homes have largely been very satisfied with them. There is the heat pump issue in extreme cold snaps where the air source heat pump at repeated days of below minus 18 in the year, I think it was winter of 2018, we had some challenges producing enough heat, and Vermont basically installed an induct, so basically a little resistance heat unit in the duct system that if the temperature outside went too far down, it would kick on some resistance heat to provide enough warm air in the house. That was the issue that folks encountered, but I think it's largely been addressed.
Great, thank you.
Senator Pearson, did you have a question?
I wanted to go back to the 0.75% starting place, and was it only, I forget the term, but did it also at 0.75 only kick in on the value above $1 million, or has there been any discussion to your knowledge of just raising the rate once you're into a high-end home that you would pay a higher rate on the whole thing?
Well, I'm going to ask Chris to chime in, but my understanding of the conversations to date has been the marginal rate above $1 million, Chris, or Senator Pearson.
But this bill also includes commercial property.
Right.
So what is a very high-end home is not necessarily a high-end commercial property.
Sure. And Senator Bray reminded us of farms too, similar
Yeah.
big in mass. Yeah.
So we may want to look at that. Senator McDonald.
Is that, when we talk about this, is this transferred by deed or transferred by stock?
Which
Chris?
transfer, the mobile home?
No, when we talk about buying property and charging this tax, is it on property transferred by deed alone? And does it exempt properties transferred by stock?
I think that's
Yes.
probably not a question that Graham has popped up.
Yep, that's true. It's not stock transfers. It's not the controlling interest.
Yeah, that
just by
would be a commercial building that would be transferred by stock.
While this applies to commercial buildings, most people who deal in commercial real estate always consider whether which gives them the best advantage to trade stock or trade or to transfer deeds. So it's not all commercial properties. That's what I'm saying.
We will be hearing from the realtors, and I am sure from the business community. Okay, any other questions for these witnesses around housing? Okay. Thank you. And
you very much.
committee,
Thank you for having us.
Mr. Donnelly, did you have something else?
No, I just
now?
said thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Committee, we've got about a 5-minute break. You want to take that and then we'll start up. So maybe Faith, can we go off live for 5 minutes?
Ending live stream.